Okay, we are live. I would fall on the sword for this one being late tonight, guys, but it was actually Scott Kennedy's fault because we get into the green room and we're ready to roll, and he has to show us these killer clips of his boy just knocking homers, dude, just chopping wood in prep baseball, and it's enthralling. And then all of a sudden we're like, "Yo, people are expecting us. Let's go!" And so here we are. So if you were us, what would you do? Would you watch this kid just chopping wood, or would you get on the podcast? I mean,
It's a good
it's a
reason to be
dilemma.
late.
But welcome in, everybody. It is the MHH podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him. He is Zack Kelberman. Zack, maybe it is just a slow news weekend, but today I found myself writing about Phillip Lindsay, not because he's in the news per se, right? I mean, the XFL continues on a pace with the Seattle Sea Dragons and all that stuff, but that's not why I wrote about him. I was thinking about George Payton and Sean Payton in their Thursday press conference, talking about how running back is not off the board. If we see the right guy in the draft, we're not we're not going to be precluded from taking a running back. And I'm thinking, you've only got 5 picks. Phillip Lindsay's out there. Phillip Lindsay could make for a dang good number 3 running back. What do you think?
I think you and I are among the few that are willing to still die on this hill. We know that Scott doesn't agree, and a lot of Broncos country does not. That's why they were not so unhappy when Phillip Lindsay left town, because they think he's a one-dimensional running back. But I think he can. I'm agreeing with you. I think he can help out a team if you use him to the right capacity. But I got to kind of read the tea leaves, and the fact that he's playing for the XFL right now and on an NFL team says that maybe the evaluation of the naysayers is not too far off. Though I'd love to have him back, and I'll always root for Phillip Lindsay.
You know, it's like that line of dialogue from Moneyball where, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'll just kind of paraphrase it, but where the scout is telling a young Billy Bean that, hey, we're playing a children's game here, and at some point we all get told that we don't get to play anymore, right? Well, like you're not good enough anymore. We all get told. Some sooner than later, but we all get told. And maybe that's what's happening with Phillip Lindsay in some sense, Zach, is that the NFL's telling Phillip Lindsay that not good enough. But I don't know, dude. That we're talking about a running back with over 700 career NFL touches, 4.5 yards per clip as a rusher, still on his career average, and he's yet to put the ball on the
right.
dirt. Now, is he the second coming of Thurman Thomas? As far as the pass catching back out of the backfield that can kind of do it all? Maybe not. But with that speed, Zach, that short area burst and quickness in a Sean Payton scheme, look, I know they're trying to go power here and they're trying to really kind of buckle down when it comes to the running game. But my mind can go crazy thinking about what could happen with Phillip Lindsay and a Sean Payton offense. But it doesn't seem like the Broncos are sharing a brain there.
I don't want to say Darren Sproles, but there's some elements to Phillip Lindsay's game with his explosion, his speed, and his game-breaking ability that could warrant a look, perhaps. But if the Broncos haven't signed him, and if he's playing for the XFL, maybe there's a reason for. They haven't signed Latavius Murray either, so maybe they are contentious going into the draft and looking for a rookie running back. Though I do see a comment like this from Todd. No disrespect, Todd, because this is a common sentiment among Broncos country. Lindsay's cooked, but based on what? I understand his shortcomings. I understand he can't pass protect that well. I understand, he has limitations in the passing game, but cooked? Did he suffer a major injury that I'm unaware of? Is he, 35 now? No, he's still young. He still has a lot of, I think, tread on his tires. And you mentioned his tangibles, but the intangibles about Phillip Lindsay right here, his heart. He's like Tim Patrick. You love to watch him play because he's going to give you every ounce of what he has on any given down, and you love to have a player like that. That's why I'm always going to be a Phillip Lindsay fan.
Still just 28 years old, for what it's worth. So he's got 2 more years left to go till the dreaded cliff, right? The 30-year-old cliff. And I'm with you, even though, we have to be pragmatic and call a spade in the sense that there is a reason why he's not rostered in the NFL right now. But it's hard to pick it out as something that just jumps off the screen or glaring when you watch his tape. And I'm including his tape post Denver, right? Houston, Indy, Miami, etc. I'm not seeing it. I just think that the story, he somehow, some way, Zach, Phillip Lindsay managed to kind of capture lightning in a bottle in Denver and defy odds that are not even funny. Like the odds that he defied just to make an NFL roster are considerable. To then go on and he was getting starter touches inside of the first quarter of the season, but Royce Freeman goes down week 7. I still remember this like it was yesterday. Phillip Lindsay then becomes the guy, goes on to post double-digit touchdowns, over 1,000 yards rushing, unprecedented Pro Bowl year as an undrafted rookie. Never happened before. And, hey, then you go, well, was it maybe just lightning in a bottle? We'll see. Well, the next year does it again. Not quite as explosive in terms of the big touchdown plays and the long runs, but really just as consistent. And I would argue too, Zach, that was in a significantly more handicapped offense where you're being quarterbacked by, in 2019, right? This was Lindsay's second year, Joe Flacco, Brandon Allen, and then a rookie Drew Lock. Whereas 2018, he had he was a little lackluster in the grand scheme of things, but Case Keenum, veteran, kept that offense afloat, kept Phillip Lindsay, credible, so to speak. And then finally the injury bug starts eating at him year 3. Then he hits free agency, and we know what happened next.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some credence to what you said that he just can't play anymore, or the NFL's trying to tell him something. What's the average shelf life of an NFL career? Like 3 years, if you're lucky. So maybe Phillip Lindsay, he squeezed all the juice he's going to squeeze out of it in terms of the NFL, and I guess the XFL is the route he's going to have to take now. We'll see how his career shakes out.
Guys, saying hello to everybody in the chat. David McElrath, the Papa Bear. And by the way, rocking his Buckham t-shirt like a boss. Love it, big dog. Saying good evening, Broncos country. Chad, Zach, Dylan, Deacon, Scott. Lindsay would be awesome indeed, but ... Buckham, yeah, ×2. I feel you. MHH for life, Denver Broncos for life. I'm just thinking, it's he's not in the news. Yes, I've watched. I haven't watched all the XFL. But I have been staying on top of Lindsay, and he looks about the same as he looks in the NFL. Like one thing about Phillip Lindsay, Zach, and it's similar to any running back, is you got to feed him a little bit to get him to kind of get their blood up. You know what I mean? To kind of get him in that rhythm. But one thing I would argue that is a little bit different. I don't want to derail this whole podcast on Phillip Lindsay. We will get back to the chat and what's on y'all's mind, but I think I would argue, Zach, one thing that is a little bit different about Phillip Lindsay is, like, say, compared to a Melvin Gordon, for example. Phillip Lindsay took far less runway getting up to speed than I would say most backs do. So 10 to 12 touches in a game would be basically all he would need to get in the lather, right, and produce something for you on the field, whereas a lot of backs, they need to be somewhere in that. When we're talking about RB1 caliber guys, they need to be somewhere in that 15 to 20 touch range to get the production. Lady D, yo, so generous. Thank you, Deanna. Love you so much up there in Alaska. Helping us keep the lights on a slow news Sunday. Thank you, my friend. She's saying evening. Chad and Zach, Lindsay would be awesome to get back. Totally agree. He never fumbles. And save our draft pick. Bring it back. MHH for life, Zach.
I was going to say, when you were talking about Melvin Gordon, what Phillip Lindsay doesn't do is, I fumbled the ball. That's what was so respectable about Phillip Lindsay's game, is that you can count on him to hold on to the football and get positive yards. What was infuriating, though, watching the little bit of the Sea Dragons I watched, they're still running him inside like an inside back, not an outside back. That was always the problem with the Broncos as well. But I think this comment, before we get to, thank you so much, Deanna. I want to say thank you again for all your generosity. But I think Keith here summarizes the Phillip Lindsay storyline right now. It's tough as a fan, but sometimes you just have to move on, and sometimes we have to resign ourselves to Lindsay's not coming back to Denver.
And that's the bottom line. I mean, that's where the bear squats in the woods is. It's a fun conversation, and I do think 1 + 1 = 2. But whatever arithmetic I'm using, I don't think that's what George Payton's using. They're looking to go younger if they add additional backs. And I think they will add at least one more back, Zach, whether it's through the draft or college free agency. Michaela, the Duchess, jumping in with also a very generous top rope super chat. Love you so much. So much. I mean, there's a reason why you are a Mount Rushmore member of this community. She says, a running back, like a car, mileage matters. Just draft one, buck 'em. So she's saying, look, similar sentiment, if said perhaps, Zach, a little bit differently than Keith, which is, Go back to the well. What's in the past is in the past. Leave it there. Go back to the well.
Yeah, and maybe that's the reason they don't bring back Latavius Murray. I'm looking at his career stats right now. He has 1,481 carries over his career. So maybe
Which is
Sean
double
Payton,
Phillip. That's double. That's more than double Phillip.
maybe there's something to what Michaela's saying here. Maybe they prefer a younger running back, maybe a cost-controlled running back, like a 5th or 6th round pick. I can get on board with that. They have a couple young guys as well on the roster, like Tyler Batty. He showed pretty well, I believe it was in the finale. So yeah,
Yep.
we should let the dream die on Phillip, I guess, and to that extent, Latavius Murray too.
And I won't lie, it has been a slow news day, news weekend, I should say. But I'm just thinking about again. I was thinking about the what was said in the press center. I'm like, hey, he's still out there. Hey, it's just a thought. Let's see what else is on everybody's mind, though, guys. Again, we don't have to. This doesn't have to be a 60 minutes of Phillip Lindsay. Mike Ronquillo in the house, throwing down. Great to see you, big dog. Love you so much. And your profile pic on Facebook is popping with the Buckham T-shirt. Man, you guys loved that T-shirt. We got to come up with something else cool, Zach. I mean, we got some things in the works for our Mount Rushmores and our certain members of certain clubs, which we don't want to spoil quite yet. That is in the works, but I don't know. I was thinking maybe like another one of Sean Payton's cool phrases, which was chasing the chicken, dude. I'm thinking making a chase the chicken T-shirt, and in a perfect world, Zach, that T-shirt would be like a chicken but with like a horse head or something, chasing the chicken, or that chicken has like a Lombardi as a head or something. I don't know. You could really get out there in outer space on that.
Maybe I'll take some Ayahuasca like Aaron Rodgers before looking at that design. That's pretty terrifying. It sounds like another phrase we can use, Chad, is quote from Sean Payton. Hopefully, we can keep the golf carts upright, and maybe
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have a golf cart with like a horse head on all fours. I don't know. We'll figure something out.
Do you think that was? And by the way, Phil, love you, big dog, down in Tucson, one of the exemplifiers of our hashtag state of being, saying, "Good evening, Chad, Zach, and Deacon Scott. Just thinking that next week at this time we'll be breaking down our picks. How exciting!" Yes, I know, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, Zach, but I think a big part of this is influenced by lack of a first or second round pick this year,
Yeah.
but I kind of have fatigue at this stage projecting what's going to happen in the third, fourth, fifth round of the draft. I'm not going to lie. Now, I don't. I'm trying to keep it real with you guys because I know as many of you are not. A lot of you are. Zach, based on what we see with our advanced analytics, as far as what we see with traffic, views, all that stuff, Broncos country, they're kind of waiting. They're kind of in a wake me up when the draft is over posture. And I kind of feel that this time. And maybe it is kind of two drafts in a row without a first round pick, kind of steals the joy of it a little bit. I don't know.
I think you're right. Plus, like you said, the Broncos don't have a second. At least they had a second round pick last year. So to wait until the third round and number 67 to get on the clock, I think is a little deflating for most casual fans. But it is exciting always who the Broncos are going to add to the team. And I think also a little bit of the lull is due in part to they don't really have a need. They don't have anyone that they have to draft like a standout roster hole. They can sprinkle here and there, but they don't have like a quarterback, like a Fields versus Surtain situation a couple years ago, for example. That's why there's not so much mystique, I think, around this Broncos draft.
I want to give a shout out here to Dominique, who was the first comment in the YouTube chat today. So props to you. Thanks for jumping in early. And yes, let's continue moving forward. I feel you. He's saying we already bridged that gap. What's up, Scott and Zach? Yes, nice, dude. As far as real news goes, though, guys, there hasn't been much. There was, however, a really good article that I would suggest everybody go read when you get a minute that Nick Kendall published over the weekend that was a one-on-one with Dane Brugler of The Athletic. And, of course, true draft nicks out there know Dane Brugler is one of the preeminent voices in what we call NFL draft media. And, Nick Kendall's such a nice guy. Dane's like, yeah, I'll give you my time. And so it was an interesting question and answer format that I would suggest you guys go read, especially if you want to learn more about the prospects, that are in the windows, let's say, for the Broncos, where they're picking in this year's draft. But Zach, as far as like straight news, there hasn't been any. But I have spent some time. The Denver Broncos PR department were kind enough to do a lot of research on the Broncos draft history, and they forward out like a kind of like those game capsules we show you guys on during the game weeks where we look at the stats, right? We do head to head and look at that. It's a document kind of like that. And I've been going through that, Zach. Props to the Broncos PR department, but I've been going through that and just kind of looking at some of the history. And third round, it'd be fun to maybe go through some of this. Scott, I don't dare do it on mine, but if you go to the website and pull up the third round one I did, and there's a fourth round one, I want you guys to see with us, kind of scratch and sniff some of the names that the Broncos have drafted in the third round, let's say over the last 10 years, and the fourth round. And there are, Zach, some cautionary tales, but there's surprisingly a lot of really good players this team has found over the years in rounds 3 and 4.
I think a big freak out among Broncos country for trading the first and second round pick is fans feel like that's the only place you can find a starting caliber player. When, like you said, if you look at history, if you look at how drafts break down, if you have a good talent evaluator, which the Broncos do, and George Payton and Sean Payton for that matter, then you can find talent across the board. Look at John Elway finding Ring of Famers in the 8th round as a UDFA. I mean, it doesn't have to be in the first two, and I think George Payton will come out of this draft with a impact starter at some point.
I looked at, I was like, well, because the Broncos did a lot of really good research, but here's your last 10 third-round picks the Broncos have made. Let's get some of that monetization off the screen here. But thank you, Scott. Here's the last 10 players, third-round picks, your Denver Broncos. Greg Dulcich, the tight end. Quinn Miners, O-line. Baron Browning, linebacker. Michael Ojemudia, corner. Lloyd Cushenberry, O-line. Draymond Jones, D-line. Royce Freeman, running back. Isaac Yiadom, cornerback. Carlos Henderson, wide receiver, and really the only true bust on this. I mean, you could argue Brendan Langley was a bust, I guess, too, and Brendan Langley bringing up the rear of the corner. I would say, I guess you could argue, Zach, Carlos Henderson, Brendan Langley, the two big busts on this list. Isaac Yiadom, I don't know if I'd quite categorize him as a bust because he's found a way to stick around in the league.
I feel like
he did originally.
He should have sticked around in Denver as a third-round pick, though. So maybe I'm more of a I don't know, meaner, greater than you. I would say he's a bust. And if you look at the list, it really kind of falls down in quality. I mean, Langley bust. This is as far as I'm concerned. Henderson bust, Yiadom bust, Freeman bust, Jones was a hit, Cushenberry, jury's still out, Ojemudia bust. But Browning, Miners, and Dulcich have one thing in common. They were all drafted by George Payton. And What did I just talk about? You can find talent, you can find quality in the middle to later rounds. That's why, for all those who wanted George Payton fired, it was so short-sighted. They're going to kill this draft again because of him.
But even in the case of that's a great point. Even in the case, though, Zach, of like a Lloyd Cushenberry, yes, jury's still out on him because he's still playing on his rookie deal. But even if the Broncos had cut him like immediately following the 2022 campaign, I would have a hard time calling him a bust just because he started so many games for the Broncos and literally out of the gates. It's like, what more can you ask of a third-round pick like that? Maybe not giving you a Pro Bowl caliber play. Like you could argue perhaps at times Draymond Jones gave you some Pro Bowl caliber production here and there. But still, like, it really depends on how you define it. Some people just define it as, did they garner a second contract with the team? If they did not get that second contract, then they're a bust or, they're a miss. I think to be a bust, Zach, there has to be stakes involved that have to do with the value of the pick. So I don't know. I have a hard time calling a third-round pick a bust just because, I mean, it's already such a crapshoot.
Yeah, I said the jury's still out on Cushenberry, and it's true. I don't think he's a bust yet, but I think he's veering in that direction because he's been in two offensive systems now, a power scheme and an athletic scheme, and it just hasn't worked out. I don't think sometimes you don't have it. It doesn't make him a bust. It just makes him, not what the Broncos thought they were getting. So maybe he'll get one more shot to prove that he's not the infamous B word.
Scott, if you would grab that fourth round one too, because I'm curious to see what everyone thinks, whether the Broncos have more recent success drafting in round 3 or round 4. And yeah, Phil, cornerback picks in round 3 have sucked. It's almost to a point where, maybe just to snap the juju, you just stay away from that position, Zach, in the third round. But I don't think that most front office guys, like there is a lot of superstition involved in sports, even in pro sports. But it's usually at the player and coach level. I don't know that a GM is going to go, man, guys who were not me busted so many times on cornerback for this team in round 3. Maybe I ought to stay away from it.
And no third-round picks, cornerbacks have been drafted by George Paton in Denver yet, so maybe give him a chance to see if he can break that curse. I think you're right. I don't think they're that superstitious where they're going to pass on BPA because previous players have failed.
But one corner, two corners. Has he drafted more than 2? Yeah, he has. 2 of the few corners that George Paton has drafted in his 2 years at the plate, so to speak, are starting, or at least projected starters for your Denver Broncos. One of whom is an All-Pro already. The other one is this cat, Damari Mathis. Here's your list of the last. I added one more just because it's fun. It's Julius Thomas. But here's the last 11. Pardon me, 4th-round picks. Damari Mathis, corner. Ioma Awazarike. I always butcher his first name. D-line. Albert Okwebunam, tight end. Josie Jewell, linebacker. Deshaun Hamilton, receiver. Devontae Booker, running back. Max Garcia, O-line. Omar Bolden, corner. Philip Blake, OL. Quentin Carter, safety. And then Julius Thomas. Now, Zach, there's only one guy on this list of 4th-rounders that garnered any, individual accolades, and that was Julius Thomas. Peyton Manning floats a lot of boats, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, all those millions of dollars Julius Thomas made when he left Denver, Peyton Manning deserved a little bit of a commission on that. But I digress a little bit. What do you think as far as 4th round recency versus 3rd round in terms of hits?
Why does seeing Max Garcia's name piss me off, though? I don't know. Toward the end of his Broncos tenure, just got so shaky. I see a lot of relative hits on here. The jury's still out on Alberto and Awuzurike. I think Damari Mathis, as do you, is going to be a quality starter. Josie Jewell got a 2nd contract, so he's on a bust. Deshaun Hamilton, I think, was. Devontae Booker, really quickly, you talk about Phillip Lindsay. He's a guy as well I wouldn't mind if he came back to Denver. He's done a lot of good work with the Giants as of late. Garcia, if he was a capable starter, I don't think he's a bust. Then you go down the list, Julius Thomas, even with Peyton Manning, you got to have some sort of there to produce like Julius Thomas did. So maybe the 4th round is a little kinder. And if you look at the list, George Payton's only had 2 4th-round picks so far. That's about to change next Friday.
And even Quentin Carter, I mean, he was a guy I was always really stoked on. Started a playoff game, that Pittsburgh victory, the Tebow victory. Started that next game, too. The Broncos got blown out by the Patriots. And then he had a bunch of injury misfortune. And honestly, Zach, even like Deshaun Hamilton, we don't know how things would have turned out for him in Denver if he wouldn't have torn his ACL away. If memory serves, wasn't that an away from the facility injury?
He drew on base himself.
Yes. And then Devontae Booker, I mean, he didn't end up getting a 2nd contract from the Broncos, but he did lead the team in rushing one of the years he was in Denver. So, I don't know. I think it's pretty close, but there could be an argument to be made that in terms of recent history, the Broncos have maybe had a little bit more success in the 4th round than they have the 3rd.
Remember when Booker went to it was Oakland back then and just tore the Broncos up in the first game again? I think it was 2018. It might have been. He was always a good running back, and another player, again, I wouldn't mind if they brought back, but it's looking like it's not going to happen.
Let's take a look at the chat here, see what's on people's minds. We might have Todd saying we should bring back Jay Cutler while we're at it. I wouldn't hate it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm one of those guys who still laments. Jay Cutler's career, the perception of Jay Cutler is very different now because of all that happened in Chicago than it was, when he was still a Bronco. I still am always going to wonder what could have been for his NFL career. Similar to like Brock Osweiler deciding to take the money in Houston, but to a much greater degree. I'm always going to wonder what would have happened for the Jay Cutler career arc in the league if he doesn't get dealt to Chicago by Josh McDaniels, just because, he's coming off a Pro Bowl year and things are looking bright. He's got killer chemistry with Brandon Marshall. There's a great young offensive nucleus, and then McDaniels blows it all up. And it'd be one thing if he made hay with the picks he got in exchange for Cutler, but he didn't. I get him confused now which ones were which, but we're talking about which ones he got from Chicago that ended up being picks. But the 1st round and 2nd rounders of that era, the Robert Ayers of the world, no Sean Moreno, but I think he was an original Bronco pick, not from one of the Bears picks. Alfonso Smith. There were some questionable picks, and you're going, instead, you could have had Jay Cutler and not those dudes and Kyle Orton, but I digress.
Jay Cutler was like Johnny Manziel with talent. He was very unlikable from a national consensus, but the dude could just light up a football field when he was actually playing and not suffering from diabetes. Remember that whole
Oh, yeah.
thing when he was diagnosed? He didn't know, and they had to have insulin, right?
Dude, that was crazy, actually, because he came in and supplanted Jake Plummer as a rookie in '06. And this was, of course, the season that immediately followed the peak of the Plummer Shanahan era, which was an appearance in the AFC title game. In fact, hosting the AFC title game in '05, losing to the eventual world champion Pittsburgh Steelers. So Shanahan gets pissed because Plummer, who had a phenomenal 2005 year, like they go to the playoffs and do what they did because Jake Plummer was so good, but he was the antithesis of that in that game. He was so bad. He was the reason they lost that game. I mean, there was a few other reasons, but Shanahan gets pissed, drafts Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler comes in as a first-round pick, and the team's totally closed ranks around Jake Plummer. He can't get in Cutler, can't get a word in edgewise, but Shanahan, of course, pulls the strings. And when he came in, dude, it didn't really lift the ships as far as the Broncos' destiny that year, '06. They ended up backing out of the playoffs. They were in the playoffs. They were on their way anyway. Jake Plummer had them leading the AFC West, in fact, when Mike Shanahan benched him. And then they missed the playoffs. But still, Jay Cutler, dude, that arm, it just popped off and that athleticism. Yeah. Cut to '07, he looked like a completely different player. And then we found out later he was sick that whole year, losing weight, not himself. And they figured out it was diabetes, got him his insulin. Totally different player. '08 rolls around and Pro Bowl.
I mean, the Broncos and missed quarterback connections. It's a story unlike any other, Chad.
Yes, indeed. Okay, let's see what we got here in the chat. Phil saying, I believe Thomas said his analytics showed, talking Julius, I think here, it said his analytics showed third round and on linemen have a 60%, O-linemen have a 60% or higher possibility of starting or being used more than other positions. Oh, Scott's trying to signal me here. Thomas Hall, thank you. Right, so analytics saying that third round O-line have a 60% higher possibility of starting. Yeah, Tom does some really interesting deep dives on just different applications of analytics, and this time of year is one of my favorite times to read Tom because he does some interesting stuff in the draft. But yes, if you want to kind of hedge, Zach, to get the most bang for your buck in the third round, it's definitely O-line based on the analytics that Thomas has produced. And the analytics are simply him going and doing the research on how picks over time across the entire NFL have succeeded or failed at each position from each round and all that stuff. Like, he spends a lot of time in the research phase before it ever ends up in a written article. So that kind of lines up, though, Zach. The Broncos could use some additional interior O-line depth, as it were, right now anyway. So I'd be shocked, Zach, if I'd be shocked if one of those two picks is not an offensive lineman.
Yeah, you have a pretty good hit rate there, about 60%. And people are forgetting the Broncos do need a center. I mean, you just touched on it, obviously, Chad, but they didn't really do much to address that except for signing Kyle Fuller and bringing back Lloyd Cushenberry and Luke Wattenberg. I would not discount that as well, them using one of the third-round picks to beef up the O-line more for Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced by what has been said about Lloyd Cushenberry. But then again, you go, well, even George Payton said it's pretty hard to find an impact player in the third round. The Broncos drafted Lloyd Cushenberry in the third round. He was a day one starter. And although he didn't go on, Zach, to provide the kind of play that brings home the individual accolades, it's no mean feat to be the Iron Man that he was and start every single game for most of, if not all of, I think it was his first 2 years, dang close anyway. So if you're looking for a guy on the holes currently still on the roster, and you're thinking, what positions do we have the best chance of finding a guy who could actually be ready to start at some point this season? Center, arguably, would be right there.
And it's not just O-line, I think, for the hit rate when you have George Payton. I mean, look at his third-round picks. You're talking about Dulcich, Baron Browning, and wasn't Quinn Miners a third-round pick, or was he?
Yeah, no, Miners was third.
So you're getting really good value in the middle rounds when you have George Payton. And I think having Sean Payton scouting next to him, and we know how good he is finding O linemen, Chad, you put them together, they're going to make hay in the third round.
Scott's saying, but who was Cushenberry competing with at center or that rookie year? I'm trying to remember who it was, Zach, in 2020.
Glasgow?
No, that predated Glasgow. Who was the center in 20? It was Connor McGovern, wasn't it? In 20, no,
I
Connor
think
was
he left
gone.
after that, yeah.
Who was the 2019 center? Why am I drawing a blank on that? Who was the 2019 center? Oh my gosh.
I can look it up.
Yeah, look it up real quick. But, I mean, yeah, we do have the internet at our very fingertips.
McGovern
yeah,
was
he
2019.
Who?
McGovern.
Yeah, so then he left. They needed to fill the hole. They did. They drafted Lloyd. I don't remember who else was on the roster though, but he was basically drafted to be the starter out of the gates. They liked his what he had between the ears, showcased a lot in terms of his leadership and football acumen in LSU's title run. They felt pretty good about that in 2020.
Glasgow was on the roster in 2020, but they had Schlotman as well and something named Patrick Morris. So I feel
That's right. Yeah, Pat Morris.
I don't
That's
remember him.
That's actually who he was competing against. That answers the question. If I remember right, Morris did not survive final cuts. He might have actually. Wait a minute. He got waived later that year for sure, but the point remains. Scott's point is still there. He wasn't exactly going toe to toe with anybody that had any investment from the team. Like it was practice squad, veteran minimum guys being brought in.
And then he played every snap that year, and he was kind of grandfathered into the role for 2021 and by association 2022. It just hasn't gone well for him, either on tape or passing the eye test.
Yeah, yeah. Three career games in the league for Pat Morris. That's the way that cookie crumbled. Okay.
Squish and Berry.
Jesse saying Squishenberry was plenty smart enough to start for any team. He just isn't tough enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something lacking there in the toughness department. I don't know if I'd say tough enough because you got to be tough just to like wade into an NFL trench, dude. And I mean, there's a certain who was it? Was it Derek Wolfe? Yeah, it was Derek Wolfe talking about during his Joe Rogan appearance, which was phenomenal podcast, guys. If you have not listened to that, you really should. But he's just talking about that it takes a certain breed of cat, Zach, to play in an NFL trench. It's a certain kind of dude. You got to be a little bit crazy. So I don't know. Maybe it's toughness. I think it's more just simply he's not strong enough. But either way, he'd be a solid backup. He'd be a solid guy that you turn to in a pinch. But the guy you're like tip of the spear pivot of your offensive line, it's a little lackluster. Which is why I think that they do something in round 3. Relative to interior O-line / center.
You could say tough. I mean, you can say mauler. You can say road grader. I don't think Lloyd Cushenberry are any of those things. And you can't teach toughness. You can't teach having a mauling attitude. And as good as Sean Payton is molding O linemen, they either have it or they don't. And I agree with the comment that Cushenberry does not have that.
All right, guys. 33 minutes. We're going to keep tonight relatively brief. So if you have any burning topics, questions, get them in the chat like Taylor here making a comment. And thank you for the super chat. Still very much in love with your YouTube profile pic. I got to say, Taylor, for what it's worth. He says, I'd love to have Phillip back, but I doubt it. Go Broncos. Yeah, guys, it's not going to happen. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. It's more just what else, what's there left to really talk about relative to breaking news right now? Not much. So let's have a fun conversation. And that's really what tonight's podcast has been about. Taylor, thank you, big dog. We also have here jumping in Bardo Tripper. This is a guy who sounds like he does listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. Bro, welcome. Thank you for that super chat. Very, very generous of you. He says, hello, Priest and Deacon Scott. I'll be catching a Broncos game in September. Will I be able to get tickets right at the stadium, or is there a website I should go to? Love the pod, guys. # Buckham, Denver Broncos for life. Well, before I answer that, first thing, Bardo Tripper, is before you decide what game you're going to go to, wait, until we announce in about 3 weeks what game in September we're going to do the MHH meet and greet at the stadium. So you make sure you can kill two birds with that stone. Go see your Bronco game, come hang out with us at MHH. So that would be really dope to meet you. But you can go. There's always scalpers outside the stadium that you can pay cash money or Venmo right then and there for tickets. You don't really go to the box office because Broncos will have been sold out long by then. So you either take your chance on some street tickets, which they're always there. So it's not taking that much a chance. It's just that you're at the mercy of scalping prices. They're quite steep. Or you go online. Zach, what are the names? You can go to
Ticketmaster,
StubHub,
yeah,
etc. There's plenty of avenues for that, big dog.
Yeah, there's SeatGeek as well, as Michaela said. There's a lot of websites, and my personal advice is I wouldn't chance it to showing up to the stadium looking for a scalper. If you want to get good seats, want to have them locked in, I would look for a ticketing website.
Seth Harmon, a legendary, long-time Super Chat superstar,
Thank you, Seth.
showing up big time for us with a very, very generous Super Chat saying, hit that thumbs up. Seth, you've been with us a long time, dude. We haven't seen you as much in the chat lately, but we're glad to have you tonight, bro, and that's very, very, very generous of you. So thank you, bro. Hope you're doing well. You got to tell us what's new with you. What's been going on, big dog? Thank you.
Thank you, Seth.
Phil says, you guys like Blake Freeland in the 4th round, if available. I'm not a huge expert on Freeland. I know Scott doesn't like him, a little too stiff. But I do like the interior O-line still. 3rd and 4th round, at least one of those 3 picks, Zach, because they've got 60, 67, 68, and then pick 108 in the 4th round. One of those 3 picks, interior.
I mean, if Freeland's going to play tackle in the NFL, I don't think they should use a 4th-round pick. They've addressed that. They have Bowles. They have McGlinchey now. They can sign a UDFA and develop him as a backup. So I agree with you. In the earlier rounds, the 3rd, 4th round, you got to look for center and maybe even a guard to push minors as well.
Todd saying Connor McGovern, the former Bronco Connor McGovern, still available, believe it or not. I know, dude. This was a guy that I liked as a possibility to come back to Denver, but he's out there still for a reason. And I don't say that to cast aspersions on him. I think he's a very solid NFL starting caliber center, but for a reason, meaning it's pretty rare, Zach, when NFL teams rekindle with a former player. It doesn't happen very often. And in Bronco history, I'm trying to think in recent times, I mean, aside from Brock Osweiler coming back in 2017, who else have we seen that happen with where they're brought back after they part ways? Seems like I'm missing a very obvious one, but maybe I'm just, of course, thinking of Brock Osweiler. It doesn't happen as much, which is another, indictment on the pounding of the table you're getting tonight from us on Phillip Lindsay. But I still like the idea of Connor McGovern. I wonder what he's asking for. I think that's probably why he's still on the outside looking in.
I'm trying to think. There's got to be a player the Broncos brought back. I was going to say in the Elway era, it almost never happened. Once he moved on, that bridge was burned, and they were an X for a reason. So I think you're right, Chad. There's a reason why McGovern's still available. Maybe he's asking for too much. Maybe there's an injury concern we don't know about, but it's not looking like he's coming back to Denver.
Doug, have a great evening, he says. Right back at you, brother. Thank you. Your cat, by the way, looks like my cat, May. I'm not a cat person, Zach. I know you're a cat person. I have not historically been much of a cat person, but my wife, she wanted to get cats to help with mouse problems. We live in kind of a rural area. And so we bought these 2 young cats and raised them up and kind of training them to be inside/outside kitties. And I am wildly allergic to them. But
Same.
One of these 2 cats I forged a very strong bond with, which is bizarre because I'm not a cat person. Her name is May, and she looks just like the kitty cat in Doug Reichell's profile pic for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'm an animal person. I mean, I grew up with dogs all my life, but a couple relationships ago, we had a cat, and I fell in love with them. And the rest is, I was so allergic, Chad. My eyes were like swelling up. My face was like a giant, sinus bubble. But I've grown to really like cats.
Let me ask you something on that, okay? So, oh my gosh, Lady D. Let me grab this from Deanna, and then I want to ask you something about the cat. Number 2, top rope. Uber generous super chat tonight. The Lady D jumping in. Hashtag 100 Club. Not the first time. Many not the first times. Like, this is so generous of you, the Lady D. She says, I'm still hoping for a center. Hello to Broncos country. Love all of you. You guys, Chad, Zach, and Scott, are amazing. Oh, you're a sweetie. Go Broncos. I have end of year closeout in September, so I can't go to any meet and greets in September. Do you guys do one later in the season? That's a dang bummer. The only reason why we don't do them later is just because weather, right? Being in the Rockies, to hang out and tailgate and enjoy the atmosphere and meet and greet, and you want the best possible weather in September. Maybe you could, Zach, get by early October. You could roll the dice a little bit. I mean, what's the difference? Like last year, I think it was either last year or the year before. It was September 29th was the actual date. So what's the difference between September 29th and October 6th or whatever? But that's why we do it in September. So we'll have to figure out some way to address that. Maybe we'll do 2 this year. We'll see.
We've been kicking the tires for a few years now and having one road meet and greet as well, not just one at Empower Field. So if we do that, Deanna, we'll be sure to tell you, and we would love if you can make it out. If you can't, we understand. But thank you so much for your generosity, regardless.
Love you. We'll come up with some kind of a solution for sure. Chef Ivo, thank you very, very much for that generous super chat, my friend. Newer to MHH on super chat anyway, so thank you, big dog. Welcome. So happy to have you guys on Sunday as well. Hashtag Buckham. Amen, brother. Glad to have you with us. Zach, before I forget, I got to ask you this because the great Mark Jensen, all right, my father, came over to visit this weekend, okay, and I was singing the praises of this cat. And also I'm a little bit, torn because as much as I love her, when I'm around her too much, I have to do it in little mini doses, and then I go wash my hands because if I touch my face, it's over, right, with the allergies. And he goes, dude, where do you think you got? Because he's had a cat for as long as I can remember. And he goes, where do you think you got the allergies from? Me, dude. I'm allergic too. You get used to it. Your body, it's almost like inoculation.
Yes.
Is that true? You think so?
It's like natural immunity. Not to get into a whole other discussion, scientifically, but
we're not talking about that.
No.
We're talking about allergies.
I was bad for the first week or 2 weeks, and then my body just kind of got used to it. And, if he scratches me, then I would get like a little irritation, but nothing like it used to be. Your body does adapt to it.
Huh. Well, I hope my wife's not watching this particular episode.
Just kidding.
But I do love this cat. All right. We're derailing the conversation a little bit on feline conversation here. Okay. Let me see. We're at 42 minutes. A couple last passes in the chat before we dip. Jesse's saying here. What? Jesse's saying here. Where'd it go? I miss our offensive lines that were smaller than any longer in the league, but still stronger and more effective. It's all on the coaching guys. Yeah, those were the Shanahan days, man. Shanahan days literally had guys like Tommy Nalen, Ben Hamilton. I'm thinking of the late era interior guys, none of whom tipped the scales at 300. They're all, 270, 275, 280, 290. They could get away with that. But Peyton, for what it's worth, Jesse, Sean Payton is looking to do the opposite of that. He's wanting to beef the line up because they're going to run some power. Not to say they won't have some kind of zone principles in the scheme, but the primary impetus, Zach, it's going to be phone booth stuff. It's going to be power gap.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking up a couple recent Saints draft picks on the O-line. 2 players, Ryan Ramczyk, who I really wanted the Broncos to draft over Garrett Bowles in 2017. He's 6'6", 313. Eric McCoy, the center, who I believe is no longer the center I might be wrong, but he's 6'4", 314. You're talking about big, burly, just road grading dudes out there, man. Like Derek Wolfe was talking about, you either have that, you either are that, or you're not, and that's what Sean Payton looks for.
Todd saying Spot Rack puts Connor McGovern's market value at $12.5 million. That may lower significantly the longer he remains a free agent. See, that's why when you look at contract values with these sites that do a lot of good work, they're a phenomenal resource for us, both media and fans. They're a phenomenal resource, spot rack, over the cap, but they can't get inside the head truly of and form a real consensus of NFL front offices. Connor McGovern being worth 12 and a half million. Like if that's what his agent saw and is going, that's what we're worth. We're holding out for it. They're going to be holding out for a while. He's not getting 12 and a half million per year on a contract, even a 1 year deal. If he's lucky, Zach, if he's lucky, something like 6 million, APY, something like that.
Yeah, those market projections from like SpotTrack, they're helpful, like especially when we're writing articles or talking about a player, but it's just like an algorithm that's like projecting the value based on the players around him and based on how many games and starts he's made. If you look at the center contracts in the NFL, Jason Kelsey is number one, making 14.25 million per year. If you think Connor McGovern is anywhere in the same atmosphere as Jason Kelsey, that's probably why he's still unsigned, Chad, if he believes that.
Definitely. But guys, we're going to keep it tight tonight. It's been a great conversation. Love you guys. Before you dip, though, we do have a few messages for you.
That was the MHH podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on Twitter at the MHH pod. Whether you're verified or not, doesn't matter. And also follow us, the main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle. You can follow Chad on Twitter at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch, Buckham merch, anything we're rocking, any of our hosts rock, go to mhhmerch.com and check it out when you can. And also, if you haven't, go to facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. Be sure you're liking that page and following that page. If you're on IG, follow us at Mile_High_Huddle. And if you haven't, guys and gals, go to Apple Podcasts and leave your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some of that merch each and every single month. But if anything, please, as you know by now, subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
Love you guys so much. Shout out, Mile High salute, much love and respect to our great Super Chat superstars and supporters tonight. Starting with Mike Ronquillo, Phil McLaughlin, Doug Raquel, pardon me, on Facebook. Really appreciate you guys. And on YouTube, we've got the Lady D, Deanna Hendry. We've got the Duchess, Michaela Parker, throwing down big. Seth Harmon, throwing down big. Thank you. Bardo Tripper, Chef Ivo, David McElrath, and that covers it. And Taylor Christensen on YouTube. And guys, I mean, I don't know what we do without you. Tonight, it's like, hey, we don't have all that much by way of news, but as you can tell, we don't actually need news to have a fun conversation and discuss the topics and sometimes, speculate, fantasize even a little bit. Maybe today that was kind of what we're doing with the whole Phillip Lindsay thing, but it wouldn't be possible without you guys, and especially our supporters and Super Chat superstars. You really do keep this thing trucking along. Keep the lights on for us. So love you. Appreciate you.
We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.